Okay, we are live. Let's just start. So, hello everybody, and welcome to Chai Time. In these podcast episodes, we have really interesting conversation about the world of AI and tech. And I'm your host Adina, and today I'm joined by Adnan. Adnan, welcome to Chai Time. It's really great to have you with us.
Happy to be here.
Okay. And the topic that we have today is really interesting topic, and it's a very insightful topic as well. We will be talking about emotional AI and the concept of human empathy as well. So, without further ado, let's just dive right into today's episode. So, the title is human empathy is emotional AI the substitute for human empathy? So my first question to you would be that how would you define emotional AI and how would you define the concept of human empathy? So, for a lot of people who don't know much about emotional AI, could you touch a bit upon that as well and first define human empathy as well?
All right. As usual, we're diving slightly into something futuristic, something that hasn't happened yet. As in, there is no emotional AI as of yet. But let's think about what exactly does it mean when we think about emotions for our humans, right? And it's not uncommon, or it's possible for humans to have less or more emotions depending on your surrounding, but also your genetic makeup and other factors that contribute. And what emotions does to us, um, strictly in a human context, is um, create emotional responses. The more emotional one of the participant in a conversation is, the more you will see um, almost the emotional response from the other participants. It's almost like infectious that happens, right? And it's a very powerful factor. It's a very powerful thing that can happen, right? We often see it in not in business conversation as much, but in religious context, in political context, elsewhere. And it's a great way to derive engagement. Now, when we talk about emotional AI, um, we can assume that it's going to be similar to emotions as expressed by a human. It's will be, of course, not as we're talking about artificial intelligence. It's mimicking human, but at the end, the goal is the same: to get the participant, whoever is engaging in this conversation with the AI, to be emotionally invested, to be emotionally involved in what the conversation is. So that's the I think idea.
Okay. And in what areas do you believe that emotional AI can be very beneficial to human beings if it does exist? And in what areas do you think human empathy is something that cannot be replaced at all?
Um, I don't know whether empathy is the same thing as emotions, right? Emotions not necessarily is just empathy. Empathy is just one shade of emotion. So I wouldn't equate directly empathy to emotions or emotion to empathy. It's emotion can be um, hope, fear, love, and a lot of other things. Empathy is just a thing that can happen, right? And when we're talking about emotional artificial intelligence, we are talking about all the shades and not just empathy, right? Because
Okay.
empathy is something actually is, I think, likely will be the easiest to imitate than other emotions, because empathy is more of an outward emotion. It's not an inward
Yes.
emotion, right?
Yes.
And the way I would define it, that an outward emotion is where you're um, discussing the feelings or the circumstances of the other participant rather than yourself, which
Yes.
is something that AI is not too bad at, right? It already can engage or understand what the person who is engaging with the AI is trying to express, right? The more complex emotion will be inward emotion or mixed emotions, in which both participants have to engage with their feelings, or something inward, such as, let's say, love, which is a very inward emotion. It's nothing to do with outward, which incidentally we have to dive into identity of the AI itself and a lot of other things that will drive that emotion, right? So um, human empathy is going to be, I think, the earliest to be replaced. I don't think it's unforeseeable to see being replaced, right? Again, um, especially in the simplest context, let's say that you're interacting with the customer service representative, right, who's
Yes.
empathetic to your situation. That I can see being replaced very easily, very quickly, and very early on. Um, I don't think there is any. Of course, like, if there are more personal or more um, delicate interaction, in which um, the kind of empathy um, where it needs to be very delicately balanced may not be a place. Like, let's say that, in health related concerns, or um, in other more very things that can very quickly diverge from being empathetic to being offensive, such as, let's say, you're discussing or talking about some kind of tragedy, right? So these things might not be easier, but again, it's gonna be, I think, the first thing that will be easier, or, like, more like will the earliest where AI is gonna start encroaching.
And in your opinion, do you think to what extent we as society should rely on emotional AI for emotional support as well?
I don't know. Reliance in in I'm not sure. Can you, like, try to give me a concrete example? What do you mean by reliance as a society?
For example, you talked about that, in some sort of, if you're facing some sort of loss of a dear friend or somebody, and you have to, somebody to talk to. If you keep on going to an emotional AI sort of a system or model, then I believe that you're more and more relying on it instead of, working towards yourself, working towards betterment, I believe.
So I've seen this being pitched a lot, right? And for some of the new, I guess, like, people who are younger, people who have um, more impressed with what they're seeing, and it's like almost their first um, some spring of AI. Um, they'll probably think of it as a novel concept, right? But this is actually the first use case that gets pitched every time the AI spring happens. And this is, in my own lifetime, is the third spring of AI, not the first spring, right? It's third, like, it goes up and then it goes down, and it goes up and it goes down. And before that, I know at least two of earlier springs that happen, right? Which, is basically, an AI spring is basically when AI becomes the main driving factor of conversation um, in technology, right? And it happens quite often, more often than most people would like to believe. And I see that being pitched a lot, in often as the first thing. And I also see this being the least interesting thing that AI can do. Um, as in, I see that, a lot of people and a lot of companies say that, oh, we're going to create a chatbot that people can go and talk to for support, right? And it's never been very impressive, frankly, right? It's you can't, again, like, I just talked about the delicacy, right? And in a lot of matters, in a lot of things, you have to be very delicate, very careful. Um, Even a change of, let's say, from singular to plural, or an additional word can change a conversation from being empathetic or being um, sympathetic to being offensive, right? So it's
Yes.
not something that AI is very good at, right? We're still um, very far from AI being understanding that delicacy. So I don't think that's something that we need to worry as of yet about, because I've never seen that reliance happen in the first place. Um, when people are looking for support, they're always um, end up finding humans, right? And outside of the entrepreneurial circles, I haven't seen that that take off so far.
Okay. Yeah, it does make sense because recently when we saw that AI model from Snapchat, people started using it. There was a lot of hype, but soon enough, people were like that it's not going to be very helpful in understanding our emotions as well. And my next question is related to that because you said that empathy is something that it can maybe catch on early on. So, do you think that in complex emotional situations, can emotional AI really distinguish between giving some sort of generated messages to genuinely understanding the emotion and then giving some sort of empathetic responses or comforting responses?
Eventually, yes. Right now, no. I mean, right now, most of the so I mean, like, let's think about where we are in the hype cycle in this AI, right?
Yes.
AI sprint, right? So the hype cycle right now is where um, it has reached um, the top, the pinnacle of where it can, right, to the maximum hype point, right? And that's the point where people are no longer hypothesizing about what it can do. They are not no longer um, hyper speculating or um, trying to guess what it can do, but more like we already know what the current um, models are capable of. So we already know that, and that's the point where also this buzz starts to die down, because people start um, getting slightly jaded, slightly um, disappointed at the capability, and that's where the hype starts slowly going down. But it's also the point where you also see a lot of productization of the capability. They're not going to be mind blowing, they're not going to change your life, but at the same time they will have some meaningful impact in real products, not just hypothetical products, or like so that's where we're at, right? And at this point we know that the text that we see or the images that we see, they are not representation of what we're asking the model, right? That's not what is happening. Rather, what we're seeing is a generation. It's a sophisticated generation, but it has nothing to do with it. It has little to do with the input that you're giving it. It's simply the output is impressive on its own, regardless of what you type into the input box, right? So it's gonna give you something that will look like human, and will have very little to do with what you asked it to do, right? And it's on its own, it's pretty amazing, that it can emulate the human to a certain extent. But think of it as in a way that you're talking to a person, or who is deaf, blind, and um, slightly mentally handicapped, right? The person is still very well versed in English. It can say something that will be very human like, but at the same time it will have very little correlation with the conversation that you're trying to have with that person, right? And um, that's the current state of technology that we have. It's not understanding anything you're saying. It is catching on certain keywords, and it's anchoring around certain biases that are prevalent in certain circles, but at the same time may not have much to do with the kind of conversation that you may want to have as a human, right? And you will see that, like, the bias always almost tries to drive you into um, certain things that may not be relevant at all. So what this means is, in this context, is we're not gonna see it replacing a counselor, a real human who can actually um, let's see, read your body signals, your facial expression. These things are not going to happen in this hype cycle. The only thing we're going to see is a pretty impressive generation of text and images, right? And that's where it mostly ends. Which also means that this while this question may be relevant soon enough, but it's not relevant in this hype cycle. So yeah.
Okay. And as we all know that AI is something that we correlate with logical sort of responses. Do you think that if there was to be an emotional AI model, would it have also like human sort of struggles, that balancing emotions with logics and emotional overload, something like that?
Depends on the sophistication of the model, just as this struggle also depends on the kind of human you ask this question to, right? So um, in human we also have this concept, right, which is basically inner peace, right? And to me, that concept basically means where you actually synchronize your emotion and your um, logical view of the world into a single coherent model, right? So your brain understands your emotions just as much as, like, so it can actually correlate. Whereas um, early um, younger people have a lot more struggle with distinguishing between, or more like integrating these two things together. Um, and in this case, what I'm um, sorry, um, somebody's asking a question, so we can address that question if you want. But that's what I'm thinking, that it's going to be similar for a more sophisticated um, model, which is using a very, I would say, curated, well cleaned up data, might not have this struggle, whereas the basic models that are running on lower computing power may struggle with this a lot more. But again, it's hyper speculation at this point. We don't know until this happens whether it's gonna be similar to humans or not. My bet is that it will be highly dependent on the kind of data that it's trained on.
And I am looking at the chat, and somebody asked questions. The second question seemed more relevant. If you want to answer that, we can answer it, or we can
Do you want
stay.
to repeat the question?
The question here is: should we start to explore more of a creative part of tech industry, or stay with the technical parts?
So we're opus, right? So we're always on the creative part of the tech industry. We're not towards the technical parts, because we don't think that that's relevant to majority of the human race, right? Majority of the human race is not interesting in the AI aspect rather than the things it can do for you, right? So that's something that we're more um, always been focused on, right? Rather than trying to sell the AI part, we want to sell that, oh, it can make your life a lot more interesting, a lot more I would say exciting.
Okay. And now coming back to the topic before we wrap up, the last question that I have is If hypothetically we do have an emotional AI and we do create a model that balances emotions with logic, do you think that what would be your opinion on treating that model? Do you think how would we treat a model, AI model that can feel? And as we've talked about it previously as well, in our episode where we talked about a civil rights movement for AI, do you think that they deserve similar rights to humans if that happens?
Of course. So, hypothetically, if we reach that level of sophistication, we will have to have this conversation, and it's not going to be an easy conversation to be had, right? Because as humans, we still, even now, struggle with giving equal rights to different ethnicity, different nations. So it's not something that we have actually figured out.
Yes.
A completely new being which can feel, think, and act, giving rights to something like that, it's going to be a very exciting time, and I don't mean it in a good way. As in, it can be a very heated battle to figure things out, and at the same time, um, it is bound to happen. We just don't know when, right? So my bet is that it's still going to take a while before we reach that level of sophistication. And that level of sophistication, when I what I mean by that is when an artificial intelligence model can have an identity. And once you have an identity, you can have certain concepts which are very specific to humans, such as personal property, such as personal feelings, such as love, and a lot of other things, which will lead us to uh, probably a completely new rethinking of what civilization mean to us. But um, lucky enough, we're not there yet, right? Things are accelerating, but we still have time to talk about it and try to. Um, um, it'll probably be too much to hope that reach a consensus, but try to at least lay down the base foundation of such a conversation.
Okay. And before we wrap up, Adnan, do you have any key takeaways or insights that you would like to share about this topic that we have?
I think it's an interesting topic, definitely. And we've been very interested in the last hype cycle. We were exploring that emotional AI, but again, right now we're more focused on the generation aspect, right? Where AI can emulate a human rather than being able to understand complex emotion from a human, right? Um, and we're still scratching the surface of it, right? Even let's say if you're talking to a chatbot, it still has trouble figuring out basic questions. So I think it's still something that needs to be worked on. And but again, like I said, it's a good time to set up um, the the parameters of what such technological um, discovery or development will lead to, and to have this conversation. So very happy that we're having this conversation. But yeah,
Yeah. So, as our conversation today comes to an end, I would like to thank Adnan. A huge thanks to you for giving us insights about this amazing topic. And we would also encourage people who have tuned into all of our socials to check out the Opus website. And don't forget, everybody, our pre-sale is live. And thank you so much, everyone. Have an amazing day, and we will see you next week. Bye bye.
yeah, have a great weekend. See you next week.
Bye.